Okay, this next bow is my favorite. We have 8 different ribbons, and usually the top 3 or 4 ribbons of the bow I use 1.5 inches, and then I get to 2.5 inches towards the back. I have my bow wire and my center ribbon. For each of these ribbons, you want to use good wired ribbon, and I cut them all at 1.33 yards. So you have 1 yard, 12 inches. All of them are cut the same. So I usually lay them out in the order I want them to be, figure it out, mix and match my colors so they're not all the same, like in one chunk together. And then I'm going to stack these so that the layer I grab off the top is the next layer I want to make. So this is going to be our first ribbon. I'm going to set all of these off to the side. Okay, for this bow, we are going to be doing 19-inch tails. So that means every single layer we're going to start the same way by measuring 19 inches. So you measure out your 19 inches, and right here at the beginning of your ruler is where you make your first little pinch. And right-handed, left-handed, I'm right-handed, so you can do it the same way I do it, or if you're left-handed, you're going to have to kind of flip-flop it or just do whatever's easiest for you. So I have my 19-inch tail here, and I gathered it here. Where this gather is going to end up being the center of my bow. So now we're going to make the loops. So we are going to, let me see how long I want this first one. Let's do 9.5. So measure out 9.5 inches here and gather it. And then I'm going to bring where they're both gathered, I'm going to stack them and just hold it with my one hand. So it's one loop. So I have my 19-inch tail here, and I measured 9.5 inches to get that loop. Now we're going to measure another 9.5 inches for this loop. Gather it. I'm going to bring it right next to. So I have this pinched, and this is where I just measured. See, 9.5 inches. I'm going to set it next to it. It's not going to cross over, and it's not going to sit on top. It's going to be just right next to it, and I'm going to hold it with one hand. So you have your 19-inch tail here. You have a loop here, a loop here, and then we have this short little tail that later we'll cut it. It'll be like a little spiky. So it should look like that. And these loops should be about the same size. So you can always double check it. But if you're measuring out 9.5 inches for each one, they'll be the same. So now that you've gathered across the bow, you can take your bow wire, and I had folded it in half to make the little loop in the middle. I'm going to hold this little loop with my bow. That way this hand is freed up. I can grab the ends of the wire here and bring them around the bow and through that loop. So then I'm going to go through the loop like a slip knot. I'm just going to pull it nice and snug, and I'm pulling from the back of the bow. So this is the front of the bow. You should just see a little piece of wire. The back of the bow is where we're going to tighten it and put a little single knot, just so it doesn't go anywhere. All right, so we are done with the first layer. We're going to leave it face down on the table so that the knot is facing up. That way, with each additional layer we make, we're going to stack it onto here and just keep using the same wire to tie it on. That way you don't have to hold all your layers of the bow at the same time. No hand cramping. All right, so we're going to leave that there. We're going to grab the next ribbon. And again, all of our tails are the same. So 19 inches, gather. And this one, I'm going to do the loops the same. So 9.5 inches. Gather it, bring it together. Now, here is the only difference. We need to alternate where the loops are, where the tail is. When we make this next layer, we want the tail coming out this side, because this side already has one tail. So when we make this layer, we need a tail on this side. So I'm going to make sure that as I'm making it, I keep the tail on the other side. So we're going to measure out 9.5, and I'm going to gather, and I'm going to bring it up on this side now. So it's going to go side by side, but it's going to be on this side, not on that side. Pinch it. This is that little spiky. So this is what it should look like. And this is flipped upside down. So if I flip this right side up, the tail's on this side now, and I made it so it's on this side. But since this is face down and we're adding it right onto this one, if I make it this way, I flip it upside down to add onto this, and that's what gives me the tail on this side. Another trick that one of my students taught me in one of my classes is that if you're making this bow and it's right side up like this and the tail's here, it should look the same as your upside down version. So this previous layer we did that's upside down, see how it's the same? That way when we flip it, then it's opposite. I'm going to tie it on with that same wire, just do a single knot. Kind of straighten it a little bit. So you should have the little spiky coming out opposite sides and your tails coming out the opposite sides. And again, I'm going to leave this face down on the table next to me. Grab my next ribbon. Move this over a little bit. All right, 19 inches, and I'm going to gather. Now for this loop, I'm going to do 10 inches. So I'm just going to go a ½ an inch longer because I don't want it too much bigger than the other layers. Okay, so 10 inches, and I'm going to gather. So I have my loop and my 19-inch tail. And this is what we have left to work with. Again, measure out 10 inches and gather. And it's going to go right next to it. So you should have one loop on each side, spiky here, and your tail here. Again, so if I flip it upside down, it's going to be the opposite of that last layer we did. So like this, you flip it upside down and just tie it on. That is the hardest part of this bow. The hardest part is just making sure that you're alternating the sides. And you might have to do it, you do it once, it might be on the wrong side, just let it go and fold it the other direction. So next layer we're going to do, I'm going to want the tail to come out this side. Now this ribbon has a pattern on it that's going one direction. So I want to make sure that when I make my bow, the tails don't have Santa upside down. I want to make sure Santa's facing right side up when the bow is made. So 19 inches facing up would be going towards the center. So I'm going to gather where the center would be so that you know your 19-inch tail, he's facing the right direction. Okay. Again, I'm going to do 10 inches. So I'm going to gather it, make a little loop. And I do, like, I make my loop and I want the tail coming out the opposite side. So just keep that in mind, that I need the loop on this side and the tail on this side. Measure out your 10 inches for your loop. And I'm going to add it in like that. So it should look like this. How cute is he? All right, so we're gonna flip it upside down. I'm gonna use the same wire to tie it on. Now we're going to go to the next layer. Oh, this ribbon is amazing also. Look at it. Super fun. All right, 19-inch tail. Gather it. And I want to make sure that my tail is going to be on the opposite side when I flip it. So, anyway. For this loop, we are going to do 10.5. So each layer of this bow are in twos. So like these top two ribbons were the same length for loops. And then the next two, which were these ones, were the same length. So now we're going to the next two ribbons. They're going to be 10.5. So 9.5, then it was 10, now it's 10.5. So you find the 10.5 point and you gather here and you make your loop. And this is where you can decide what direction you need your tail on. I need it to be the opposite of Santa. So I need it on this side when I'm making it. All right, pinch it. Measure out 10.5. Pinch it here. It's just gonna go right next to it. Except I flipped it. Oh, that's why. Accidentally flipped my ribbon when I was making my loop. 10.5 inch, gather it. There we go. I was like, something don't look right. All right. Always make sure your right side is facing up. So I have the tail here. Loop, loop, little spiky. And we are going to add it right on to this one. Nice and snug. Now we're going to go on to the next ribbon. And that loop is also going to be 10.5 inches. So let's measure out 19 for the tail. We're going to gather it. We're going to 10.5 for the loop. Gather it. All right. I always double check and figure out where I need my tail to be. I need my tail to be on this side when it's upside down. Like so. So when I'm making it, I'm going to make it on where it's coming out that side. That way when I flip it, it's coming out the other side. And where the center of the bow is, make sure we measure 10.5 inches for this loop. Bring your two bunches together, side by side. And so I have a tail here, loop, loop, and a spiky. I somehow managed to switch hands, I don't know how. Flip it upside down and add it right onto the back of this layer. Do a single knot. Okay, 2 ribbons left. So let's measure 19 inches for the tail. I'm going to gather. Now these loops, we want 11 inches for the loops. And I need my tail going that way. Okay, so 11 inches, and I'm going to gather it, bring it together, 11 inches, gather it, bring it side by side. So it's like this. I'm going to add it right on and tie it. Now this was a burlap ribbon, so it's kind of stiffer. I'm going to double knot it so it doesn't slip out. All right. The last layer. Another one that has a pattern going a certain direction. So I want to make sure that when it's on the tail, it's facing the right side up and not upside down. Okay, so I'm going to measure out 19 inches. And like I said, make sure that this is the bottom of your tail. You want your ribbon pattern facing the right direction. 19 inches and gather. And then we want 11 inch for the loops. 11 inch loops. And I need my tail going out the opposite direction when I flip it. And I always kind of check. If I'm looking at this the right side up, I kind of look at the last layer that's the wrong side showing, so it's flipped. And I make it look the same. That way when I flip it, then it's opposite. It's the hardest part to explain in a video. All right, 11 inches. I'm going to gather it and bring it right next to that layer. So, should have a tail here, loop, loop, and a little spiky. Flip it over and tie it right onto that previous layer. All right, this is the last layer. So I'm going to double knot. Just doesn't go anywhere. And I'm going to kind of make sure I keep an eye on the center where all the wires are stacked and separate the tails the same way. Make sure they're all going the proper direction because we are going to add the center ribbon across. So I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to lay this ribbon on the top and I'm going to get a good grip on the ribbon from the back, and with my other hand I'm going to try and smash all the layers as tight together as possible. You want this center ribbon as tight as you can get it. That way you have a poofy bow. So I smash all these layers down together and then I kind of pull them towards the front of the bow so nothing is getting pushed to the back. I just go layer by layer, kind of tugging a little bit. All while holding the center ribbon from the back. Okay, so once you get it nice and snug, I'm gonna hold it with that hand, and we're gonna cut these flaps a little shorter and glue them right on top of where that knot is. Some glue there. Glue it down, let it dry. And glue this one down. And hold it there while it's drying real good. And like I always say, I leave the wire on so that I can attach my bow onto my project. Wreath, a gift, Christmas tree topper, all kinds of fun stuff. I love this bow. Roll up the extra wire so it's out of my way so I don't accidentally trim it. Okay. Now we are going to be cutting all the little spikies that are shooting off the top of the bow. So let me find them all. I want the bow round looking, so that's why I usually bring all these spikies towards the top. Now, when we are trimming these, we want them, obviously I don't want them tall like this, so I'm going to cut them so they're about the same rounded shape as the bow, the loops. So I'm just going to take my time. Like, I don't want this one super long compared to the loop. So I'm going to cut it pretty even with where the loop goes. And I like that dovetail, so I'm going to cut at an angle. And I'm going to take my time, layer by layer, trimming off the ends. And then obviously your loops will get a little bit bigger towards the back. So when I'm cutting these back spikes, I cut them with the same, like about the same size as their loops. Okay, now we do the tails. Flip it around. You should have 4 tails coming out each side of your bow. So I usually stack up the ribbons. That way I can make sure that they're all pretty even. That way I know one isn't way longer than the other. So I'm basically going to just be evening out the bottoms. Like this one here is probably the shortest. So I'm going to make them all that same length, and then I'm going to dovetail them. And like I said, this doesn't have to be a perfectly straight cut because we are going to be dovetailing the ends anyway. All right. So now you're just going to go layer by layer, cutting your ends. Fold it, cut at an angle, toss it aside. Look at the next one. Oh, I love this ribbon. It's so cute. That one. Now we are going to fray check. Get your fray check out. Mine is almost empty. And you're just going to go through each layer and just do a thin line right where you cut. That one's else. Makes all the difference, so your bow will look good for several years. If you don't have any fray check yet, you can get it on our website and then just fray check your bow later. We're just going to do just a thin little line. It's hard to tell, but just on the cut edge. You don't want to squeeze it out to where it's like gooping up all down your ribbon. Perfect. So there is your bow. It's kind of hard to fit it on the screen. So you have all these loops. You can just round out, fluff up all the different loops. You don't want them all smashed. I'm just trying to spread them out a little bit. It's a good thing about wired ribbon. You can like tug on it, yank it, put it where you want it to go. All right, so you fluff up your loops a little bit and you're good to go. You have all your little spikies here. That we still have to fray check. And then you have the tails. Let me fray check these real quick. I'll forget and I'll never get back to it. Hardest part is not missing a ribbon. You'll miss a ribbon and forget to fray check it. All right, perfect. So now your bow is done. You can leave these tails hanging like this, or sometimes we like to add like a wave to it, or you can curl it up and you can leave it like that, or you can pull the curl. There's a lot of different ways you can design your tails. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I hope you love your bow. And we are gonna go on to the next one.